Hello, and welcome to this tour of TensorPlayground.com. When I load TensorPlayground.com, I get to see this page right here. When you load it, you may or may not see this because you're from the future. So if you go up to TensorPlayground.com and make sure that you are fitting the version I have, TensorPlayground.com/1.0.0, then you'll see exactly what I have and you'll be able to follow along. TensorPlayground.com is a place to work and immediately get feedback from TensorFlow.js tensors. So to that effect, we need to have some input tensors ready for you to mess with. We have RGB tensors, monochrome tensors, RGB batch tensors, and of course, no input tensor whatsoever if you plan on rolling your own. For now, we'll go to our RGB tensor and we'll work with that. As you can see, when I select it, our comments get updated in our code block. It tells us what our inputs are, and we're provided a function where we can mess with that tensor and then view the results on the right side. The two parameters that we're getting here are 1, TensorFlow.js, and 2, the tensor that's getting passed in. Now, if I don't do anything but return this tensor, then the output will be the input. So I'll click Run here, and we can see this beautiful dog over on the right side. We also get some additional information about the 4 pixel corners and some information about the actual values of the tensor itself. Another thing that we're getting here is the ability to view the code memory results. As you can see, we were able to run this code ahead with no new bytes, no new created tensors because we're using the one that was passed in, and the execution time was 0.00 milliseconds. That makes sense. And we could take a look down here at the bottom and see the browser tensor memory. This tells us the bytes that are in the browser from tensors. That's of course the image. And then here we can see the one tensor that was passed in that we're using right there. So inside of Tensor Playground, we can watch our code results, check on performance, as well as actually notice how well our browser is doing overall. Now, we're not limited to just tensors. For instance, we could also return common JavaScript objects, like let's say the good old array, 2, 3, 4. And when I run that with Shift Enter, I can see that immediately I'm getting the array over here on the right side. And this helps us identify more advanced JavaScript objects as well. Let's try a float32 array. You can see that we have a coding mistake, and it actually tells us float32 arrays require a new before we actually create that object in the constructor. So we'll do that here, and then ta-da, we can see the result on the right side. You can also see here that we have access to the console logs. So if I decided to send a little message over here, and I use Shift Enter, then when I go to the console logs, I can see that message prints out inside the console log without opening the developer menu. And I can clear the logs directly from here as well. This is a fantastic ability for us to go ahead and work with tensors and the outputs to see them directly inside of our browser. Now that I think I have a fantastic set of code here, I want to share this with a friend. I can click the share button, and this gives me a link that I can copy. And passing this on, I can pass questions, problems, tensor solutions on to my friends so that they can load this code up. They'll also get immediately version 1.0.0 and they can play along. If at some point you want to work with something a little bit more advanced, we can also bring in models. So we can select some commonly used models or a custom URL and bring these in so that we can actually pass our tensors through the models as well. This then becomes part of our function that we can access. If at any point you get stuck, we have the TensorFlow.js docs linked here. And of course, this is an open source project, so any features or bugs that you might find can be reported here on GitHub, and we will take a look at them. I hope that you have enjoyed the tour and you feel familiar with TensorPlayground.com so that we can dive in and play with TensorFlow.js. Thanks and cheers!